Uh, Hello, I'm John Kay. I'm the director of Traditional Arts Indiana. It's a statewide folk arts program based here at Indiana University. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But I want to welcome you all and thank you all for being here. This is really part of the backbone of the work that we do as Traditional Arts Indiana is how do we support individuals within communities to make sure that traditional arts are valued, are continued, are honored, and really kind of are rooted in community life. And so we'll talk about that as we get through this. So I should tell you a little bit more about the program that I direct. As I mentioned, we're based at Indiana University. We're right on the IU Bloomington campus, but we're a partnership with the Indiana Arts Commission, which is a branch of state government. And so we receive money every year from the Indiana Arts Commission. We also get money from the National Endowment for the Arts, but we also get my salary and my grad assistants and our offices and all of that are provided by Indiana University. And with those three partners kind of coming together, we're able to do programs like the Apprenticeship Program and the Heritage Fellowship Program. We're recognized by the state as the official statewide service organization for Indiana's folk and traditional arts. We've been doing this work since 1998, but we became recognized in 2007. And as I said, we received this support from the university, the Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Our primary work is that we exist to identify, document, and support the folk and traditional arts of our state. So we go out and we do research and we try to identify these traditions. We encourage people. We've probably talked with many of you all. We try to document them. We sit down and we do interviews with people. And then we figure out what programs can we do that might be able to support and maintain those traditional arts. So when I say folk and traditional arts, what am I really talking about here? The folk and traditional arts, which include crafts, dance, music, oral traditions, visual arts, and others, are those that are learned as part of our cultural life, the cultural life of a community. Usually people share a kind of a common ethnic heritage or certain cultural mores, language, religion, occupation, regional traditions are a part of that as well. I'm going to admit Dee and Margaret here so you can see the slides hopefully. Um, and it's these traditions that are shaped by our aesthetics, or the things that we see as being good and pleasant, and are valued and shared in our culture and are passed from generation to generation, most often within families and communities through observation, conversations, and practice. At least that's the definition, roughly, from the National Endowment for the Arts. So when we say this, as folklorists, we have a much broader definition of folk and traditional arts sometimes than what the NEA recognizes. But in general, we're looking for those traditional cultural expressions that are passed within a family or community. And we're looking not necessarily uh, for highly recognized artists, but we're actually looking for those people that are known in their home community, those people who are valued there, and what are those traditional arts that are part of those particular communities or groups. Traditional Arts Indiana, we have three statewide programs that we do. We're going to talk about two of them. We have a lot of other work that we do, but I won't bog us down with that. But our other big initiative that we take care of, and Katya does a lot of wonderful work on that, is our rotating exhibit network, which we create traveling exhibits that tour to libraries all around the state, to over 40 libraries. So at any given year, there's about 350,000 people who see our traveling exhibits. And often those exhibits are about apprenticeship teams and about heritage fellows and about the work that we're doing for Traditional Arts Indiana. Our second program that we'll talk about first is the apprenticeship program, which facilitates and funds the apprenticeships, where master artists teach the next generation. And then finally, our fellowships, which TAI awards a one-time lifetime achievement award to a folk artist who's made a significant contribution to their community. And we'll talk more about that too. So let's get into the program and talk specifically about the apprenticeship program. Apprenticeships. These are these kind of time-proven cultural practices. Apprenticeships has been a way people have passed on traditional knowledge for millennia, and I think that it's appropriate for us to try to do apprenticeships as a way for us to try to keep community traditions rooted in community life. So apprenticeships support the continuation of cultural practices in Indiana communities through funding pairs or teams, which enables apprentices to learn essential knowledge and skills in a traditional art form from a master artist. And so it's really about this kind of passing on of traditional knowledge from one generation to the next. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be within a family or that the master artist has to be older. It just means that there's some knowledge that one person has that another person is wanting, and this idea of the continuation of that. Examples of this can be someone who makes an object or plays music or practices dances. But the key part is that it's rooted in community. It's traditional in that the skills, aesthetics, and values are shared over time, as I said, often within families, community, religious settings, and occupational settings. So it can be gospel piano, as we've done in the past, or it could be a family tradition of tying hoop nets. But we're looking for these things that are rooted in an established community of people. Here's basically how it works, and we'll probably talk more about this in our private settings, and I encourage anybody that's watching this after the webinar to reach out and contact us, and we can explain it in more detail to you. But apprenticeships, basically master artists find their own apprentices. Sometimes the apprentice finds them, but often it's really up to the master artist to kind of choose to be to take on an apprentice. It sometimes gets really odd when the apprentice writes the application for the master artist and kind of comes in the other way. The master artist knows what needs to happen, and so we like to start there with them. We use this word master artist. That means that they've mastered a skill that they could teach. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're world class or does a really fine type of thing, but they have a mastered skill that someone else is wanting to learn from their community. We tend to support this. It's a year-long, or usually works out to about 9 months by the time we get our funding and everything lined out. And so we fund these apprenticeships through a $3,000 stipend or honorarium that we pay to the master artist. So the master artist will get $3,000. And then the apprentice and the master artist also come up with a budget so that the apprentice says what they need to do their work. So the apprentice can receive up to $1,000 in additional support for supplies or for tools or for travel. So if we have somebody who needs to buy a new banjo, they have up to $1,000 to buy a banjo. If we have somebody who needs to pay for childcare and mileage to drive back and forth for their apprenticeship program, they have up to $1,000 to do that. They just kind of outline what they're going to spend the money on. All that money goes directly to the master artist, and then the master artist distributes it to the apprentice. You'll fill out an application form to do this, and applications are due on November the 28th. That's the date we've selected for both the Heritage Fellowships and the Apprenticeship Program. The applications are not egregious in their length that they take. They're not that difficult, but I do highly recommend that each of you reach out to us to kind of help you do this. When it comes to work samples or narratives, we're here to help, and you can just shoot us an email or give us a call, and we'll work with you on trying to make sure you get your best foot forward on doing that. Some of our apprenticeship teams from this last year, I thought that I would share with you. Marco Batista, Zapotec Weaver, and Dyer taught his nephew, Aldo DeBron. Marcos lives in Marion County, up in Indianapolis. And it's just a wonderful apprenticeship program that they have actually done, where his nephew has basically learned the skills of doing the basics of weaving, and just really a wonderful example of that. We've worked with quilters. We've actually had Amelia Culfer a couple of times in our apprenticeship program. So we're looking for more quilters out there who not just do quilting in general, but actually quilt within a very specific community or group. And so I keep using that word community and group over and over again because that's kind of the key to these art forms. We fund individuals, but those tend to be in order for them to kind of continue something within a particular group of people. We've had funding several times for hoop net makers down on both the Wabash and the White River. This is Danny Kane and his nephew Irvin Garrison. The tying of these commercial hoop nets is at one point was a very kind of a rare thing. It's still a pretty rare traditional art here in Indiana. Danny was learned from an old net maker through an apprenticeship, and since then he's kind of taken on doing that himself. We've also have Larry Haycraft and his grandson Tyler Mason, who've done just wonderful work learning to tie this kind of distinctive family tradition of hoop nets down in Pike County. Larry's been in the program before. When I first met Larry, he taught his kids to tie knots, but I don't think he had taught any of them actually the full steps in making a net. Now he's been through the process a couple of times, and he's taught a couple of people, a grandson and a son. So it's passed on. He's a fourth generation net maker. He's passed it on to a fifth generation and now the sixth generation of his family. We also have worked with Katrina Mitten a couple of times. She's worked with members of the Miami tribe, specifically her granddaughter, Josie Cirillo, this last time. And they came to campus and did an artist in residency here, and it was just wonderful to have them here sharing not just the beadwork, but also telling the stories, which are so much a part of that art form as well. Then Jim Smoke, who's on the Zoom call today, down in little town of Pekin, or New Pekin, I think is actually his address reads, if I remember correctly. And he's teaching five-string banjo to Jeff Vessels. He finished his apprenticeship program, but he's still teaching Jeff on doing that. Legendary bluegrass banjo player, who's performed with some of the real bluegrass greats, including Bill Monroe and Earl Scruggs and Snuffy Jenkins and Little Jimmy Dickens, and the list just goes on and on. Just wonderful to have him be a part of our program. And then Carrie Zimmerman down in Corydon, Indiana, was teaching glass making to his daughter-in-law. Carrie is the fourth generation. She's the fifth generation, and Carrie's also been working not through the apprenticeship, just on his own, to pass on glass working to his grandchildren as well. And so, as you can see, each one of these art forms are very much rooted not just in family traditions, but also in community traditions. That often they happen in families because that's where the time to do this ends up being. But ultimately, it's about art forms that are valued by a greater community there. So that's the apprenticeship program. Deadline is on November the 28th. We're here to help you. It's a simple PDF application. You just answer the questions. You get letters of support. You submit work samples for that. And we're here to help you with each step of that. The Heritage Fellowships is a similar program where the apprenticeships kind of look backwards or look forwards to how does this knowledge continues into the past. The Indiana Heritage Fellowships looks at the present and also glances backwards and looks at the lifetime achievement of a folk and traditional artist, someone who has made a significant contribution to their community through the art that they make and share with their community. So one of our very first awardees was Harold Klosterkemper. People up in Greensburg, Indiana, where he was from, called him Master Harold. And the Indiana Heritage Fellowship Award recognizes a traditional artist who's made an outstanding contribution to their artistic tradition and to their community. The award honors the individual's long-term achievement within an art form that is rooted in community life in Indiana. Recipients of this award receive an honorarium of $1,000 and an art prize, some type of handmade piece of art. This last couple of years, we've used handmade redware plates by Tom Winsick, who's a wonderful artist here in Indiana, down in Posey County. Nominations, work samples, and letters of supports will be reviewed by a panel of traditional artists and community specialists. Competitive nominations will be able to address the role of the nominee in their community as well as in their craft or music tradition. Nominees should demonstrate excellence in their artistic tradition through the support of materials provided. I should say that both of these programs are patterned after work that happens at the National Endowment for the Arts. The Indiana Heritage Fellowship Program is very much a program that is based on the National Endowment for the Arts National Heritage Fellowship. We give out just $1,000 on a little art prize. If you get a National Heritage Fellow, that's $25,000, and usually they fly you to Washington, D.C., and they have a big celebration for you. So our whole goal in this is to honor people here in Indiana, but also to see who we might be able to put forward for this larger national recognition. And so that's why we started this program back in 2019. Heritage Fellowships, a little bit more. As I said, the Master Artist is nominated by someone in their community. It's reviewed, both the Apprenticeship Program and the Heritage Fellowship. We don't just pick people. They're reviewed by an external panel. We get people artists, scholars, community workers to help us select who gets picked. The TA staff then enables us to be able to help you all to prepare your application. So you don't have to be a professional grant writer. You shouldn't have to hire anybody to help you to do this. We're here to kind of help you put together your application and kind of help put your best foot forward, as I said before. Recipients, as I said, receive $1,000 in an art prize and then due on November the 28th. And so both of those are important programs. So some of our recent, this last year, we recognized Sandra Brothers, an African-American quilter who's up in the Fort Wayne area, who actually helped start a program called, or guild called the Sisters of the Cloth, a well-known quilting group up in that part of the state. As well as Jim Smoke, who's on the call here today, bluegrass musician extraordinaire from down in Washington County, Indiana. And Carrie Zimmerman, who is also in our apprenticeship program, who we recognize. But we've had lots of other people. We've had Deborah Bolaños, a ballet folklorico dancer from up in East Chicago. We've had Danny Tipman, a Miami traditional plant knowledge bearer. We've had Bob Taylor, a wood carver. We've had Dee Neerman, rag rug weaver. We really try to go around the state and we try to honor the lifetime achievements of folk and traditional artists in our state through these programs. So this is where I kind of stop and I say, are there any questions? If you're watching this at this time, do know that we'll answer any questions that you might have if you just give us a call, and we'll happily do that for you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll open this up for any questions that people might have that are on the call. I know I didn't answer everything. We can go through any of the application that you want to go through. That would get a little tedious. I think that's better left for us to just kind of work through one-on-one. I recommend that you, even though it's not due till the 28th, and that is you can email that, you can mail it. We kind of have that as the date that we need it by, or at least be postmarked by. But we're here. If you get it to us earlier, we'll read through it. We'll work on it with you. We'll make suggestions for you. we're here to help. So what questions do you have?
John, can we talk through maybe some of the challenges that people run into, or some of the most common reasons maybe why people don't get funded for one of the programs or the other?
That's really good. I should have had that in the thing. I think I used to have that on the slide and I lost that. Okay, some of the primary problems with why people don't get funded for the apprenticeship program. We'll talk about that first. Uh, First of all, if it is an art form that you don't make a case for being specific to a specific community or group, you should be able to root it within some type of um, of either a social group. There's a network of weavers, or there's a network of bluegrass musicians, or there's some type of community of basket makers. If it's not rooted in a community group, if it's just an individual artistic expression, that's not a compelling reason for why we should do this type of intervention to ensure that it continues on. So we're looking for something that's rooted in a particular community or group, often that is very traditional, that's passed down from one generation to the next. So that's one aspect of what causes people. They just, they do an art form that they learned in grad school that is not necessary. Doesn't mean that you can't go to grad school, but it's an art form that is like about being in galleries, and it's not. There are plenty of grants and awards for that type of work, for both fine craft and that sort of thing. We're doing something different. We're looking at how arts are rooted in community life. So that's the first problem. The second problem is kind of related to that. They pick an apprentice that is not part of their community or group. So you have to make a reason both for yourself to be doing this art form and how you're celebrating that within a particular community or group, but then also flipping it back around. Why is it important for you to teach this person? If you're just training them to be an artist, as I said, there's lots of programs that fund people to learn to be an artist. But if you're training someone to continue a certain aesthetic form or certain craft tradition, somebody who's going to support a particular community or group, that becomes a compelling argument. And so it's not just about replacing somebody's lessons. So you have to make the argument of why you're the one that should be teaching, and then why this apprentice should be there, should be the one that's selected. I'd say 9 times out of 10, it's almost always someone picks the wrong apprentice. The other thing about the apprentices, well, it's important for you to think about, it's important for the apprentice not to be totally unexposed to the art form. This is not intended to be, if we're going to fund somebody to learn for a year or 9 months, and they get 2 weeks into doing basket weaving, they go, this really isn't for me. I don't like this. That's not, no, it's not doing anybody any favors. So if you're going to be doing quilting or you're going to be playing banjo, it needs to be someone has to have some proficiency to it and some exposure to it, and know that they're going to be around for a period of time with this, that they're going to be engaged with this. Third or fourth, I've lost track here, reason that there's not community support for it. Not only are you making the case for you doing this, but it's like, oh, we're going to do this work, and it's going to be also introducing that apprentice to a whole community or network of people maybe that are around this. So if Jim's teaching banjo to somebody, he's also taking him to jams. He's including him in concerts. He's doing that with them. If Peggy's doing an apprenticeship with Taylor on weaving, she's going to be not just teaching her, but she's going to be introducing her to a whole network and community of weavers that are there. And so that becomes compelling, is like that there's a community buy-in and support. That's why we ask for letters of support, that there are people that aren't just saying, oh yeah, this is a great artist, but they're actually saying, yes, they're a great artist, and this community really endorses this, and we really think that this is a good thing, that this is going to happen. I've had us have projects that I didn't think would be funded, but they got enough support from the community that it compelled the panel to choose it. And so that's what we're really looking for. Um, you know, so I think the community and group aspect of it. So if you're doing, I'm thinking about Dean Ehrman, who's on the call. When she was getting the Heritage Fellowship, there were so many people from that greater community that really endorsed her work as being like significant. I was just down at Fort Valonia days and saw her. Very much there was a lot of support that their community needed this family tradition to continue. So I thought that was really compelling. So I see a question here from M to everyone. Are there examples too big or too small? Um, I think I I don't think that there's necessarily too big or too small. Now there may be traditional arts that are like if you're passing it on within um, you could do it in a weekend workshop. Well, what's the whole point in doing an apprenticeship? You know that you have to have enough there. Now, having said that, um, sometimes traditional apprenticeships are not just about teaching the art form, but as I said, introducing to a community of people. And so you could be that you're going to take somebody through a whole annual cycle or something of events and activities that you're going to be that you're going to teach that kind of culture work side of things to it. Um, so I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I think I don't. I think that there has to be enough there that there's a reason for us to intervene and fund something like this because we can only do a few, uh, but it needs to be. It doesn't have to be. Oh, this is so complicated. It takes 9 months to actually master it or to get it. Most of these art forms, I think, actually will take way longer than 1 year apprenticeship could ever do it justice. But also within that 1 year, you kind of set a trajectory for a person to kind of continue in that work afterwards. So, what other questions do you have? Em?
I have a question. Is it very competitive in terms of lots of applicants every year, or does it fluctuate from year to year?
It fluctuates, but in general, we're probably looking at funding 6 or 7 of these this year. Um, it could grow a bit more. I have to look at our budget and that sort of thing, but probably 6 or 7. If this year is like previous years, I bet we'll probably have somewhere between 12 and 20 applications. So it's a 50-50 on the front end of that. Having said that, what often ends up happening is the people who get selected are for the well, that's for the apprenticeship program. Heritage Fellowship, it's usually not quite as many applications for that, um, but it's also really competitive because we only do 1 or 2 people for that a year. We did for during a COVID time uh, bump that up a little bit, but I think we're probably going back to 1 or 2 people this coming round. Everything's up subject to change, but the apprenticeship program um, is yeah, it's about a 50-50, and almost always it's somebody who hasn't. They make one of the mistakes that I mentioned. It's either A, they didn't make the case for why the art form is significant to a community or group. B, they didn't pick the right apprentice to work with them, or C, the apprentice is a novice, or novice is fine, but somebody is totally unproven, so it's not a good estimate of, or you don't necessarily feel comfortable making that type of investment into somebody. So, to me, those are kind of the 3-4 problems that people have. uh, making the case for the art form, making a case for the apprentice, preparing the apprentice to do the work, and why it is that you as a master artist are the one that should be doing this. And that has to do with situating you within a community. Heritage fellowships, often it's just a matter of, talking about the significance of the person, what they've actually done, not just in the past, but also their role teaching people or being a community leader or a kind of a role model for other people. Almost all the people who have received this have been someone who's kind of recognized in their community, but also someone who kind of is working to further their craft or their music traditions or dance traditions. I should say this about the apprenticeship program, and it's somewhat true for the Heritage Fellowship too. These are not grants. These are basically, it's not like, oh, you prepared a good proposal and so you get awarded this as a prize or whatever. It's really about, you put forward a prospectus for us. That's what the application is. And then Traditional Arts Indiana is going to go into a partnership with you for the year. We're going to expect you to kind of come to these cohort meetings via Zoom. We're going to come down and talk with you, doing site visits. And it's part of becoming part of our team at Traditional Arts Indiana by being selected to be in this cohort or this group. And so and I think that's true for the Heritage Fellowships as well. It's not just a prize, but it's a way of saying this is what traditional arts in Indiana is about and is like. I noticed that Ketch added some stuff in the chat here too for people.
Yeah, so I've just posted the links to both the apprenticeship page and the Indiana Heritage Fellowship page. There are PDF and Word versions of both applications available on the individual pages for that. But you can always go to our homepage on Traditional Arts Indiana for our website and find all that information there as well. Our website is traditionalarts.indiana.edu.
And if you just type in Traditional Arts Indiana in almost any search engine, it's going to come right up first. We've been doing this a little while. Any other questions that you all have? I've kept you on here about an hour, which is kind of my limit. I don't know about you all, but that's a goodly enough Zoom time. I want to thank again Katja and Claire for their work on both of these programs. As I said, I couldn't do this without them by any means. And they're the ones that primarily, if you need help filling out an application or you want somebody to give it a read and tell you what it's missing, they've been doing this now for a couple of years going on, and they've got a lot of good insight to help you put together the best application possible. Anything else? We'll go ahead and we'll close this out. Thank you all again for being here. Again, I want to thank the National Endowment for the Arts and the Indiana Arts Commission and Indiana University for funding this type of program so we can make this available to people. So I'm very appreciative of them as well. Thank you all so much.